Thank you for joining this presentation entitled Direct Mail Solicitation. This presentation is part of the Indiana Historical Society's Heritage Support Grants program, made possible by Lilly Endowment Incorporated. My name is Bryce Gorman, and I am the fundraising educator in local history services at the Indiana Historical Society. My goal is to help organizations build robust fundraising programs so they can be effective at their mission. I'm responsible for the educational curriculum that's an important part of our Heritage Support Grants program. I offer free workshops, webinars, and consultations to organizations in Indiana. Direct mail involves the physical letters that your organization sends out for solicitation to donors. Direct mail is a classic fundraising tool that's been used for over a century. Commonly, direct mail solicitations are part of an organization's annual fund, but that doesn't mean that they're only sent out annually. Direct mail has changed over the past 20 or so years. It's more intertwined with other types of fundraising efforts, most commonly online giving. A letter now would be sent after a successful event, or it might direct readers to make their gift online, or it might be followed up with an email. So let's talk about some of the benefits and risks of direct mail. Direct mail often solicits for unrestricted support. Unrestricted cash is funds that you have complete discretion over. So they're not restricted to any particular use like collections care or programming. You do have the option to use a letter for something restricted like a special initiative if you believe your audience would want to fund a specific project, but often the letters are used for unrestricted support. So direct mail is a very approachable way to attract new donors. People expect a solicitation letter. It's not seen as intrusive like a phone call would be. And it's more personal than an email solicitation would be. Direct mail is often much more cost effective than a lot of other fundraising options. Essentially, you need a mailing list, letters, stamps, and envelopes. Compared to a large event or building an online giving site, letters are much more straightforward. So it's helpful to look at solicitations like direct mail as a way to build relationships with donors, especially major donors. Larger donors often will, quote, test the waters of a new organization with a small gift. And so this becomes your chance to show you can properly thank donors and use their funds wisely and cultivate that relationship. When done well, direct mail is a stable source of income, which is always a benefit. If you send out letters on an annual or a semi-annual basis, you will find some donors who you can depend on to renew their gift. This gives your organization more ability to plan for future budgetary needs. So on the other side, there are some risks attached to direct mail. Your organization may be sending out letters the same time 5, 6, 10 other organizations are sending their letters to the very same individuals. This creates a high competition for limited funds. Another risk is that messaging can become stale year after year if it doesn't change. If every year the same message is, we need operating support without giving any indication of what's changing, then it becomes stale. When you look at the various types of fundraising options, like large events or a planned gift, direct mail gifts can seem smaller. You might see gifts of $20, $35, $150, which is wonderful. But compared to the larger gifts you would see for a major gift or a grant, it would be smaller. And these gifts tend to trickle in over several weeks, not all at once that you would see with, say, an event or a major gift. So if there's not enough gifts coming in, then the mail loses cost effectiveness. So look for opportunities to upgrade donors or solicit them for a slightly higher amount when it's appropriate. While I had mentioned in the benefits that direct mail is indeed cost effective, that effectiveness is slowly eroding especially when it comes to growth from online options. There are a lot more ways now to set up an online giving site than there were 20 years ago. So letters don't have the same return on the investment. And as a result of that, it's good to use all of your solicitation strategies, online, direct mail, phone, face-to-face, intertwined and supporting one another. Finally, direct mail can have a low response rate. Your organization may send hundreds of letters out and only receive a couple dozen responses. This can be mitigated by keeping an up-to-date mailing list and keeping your messaging fresh. So who's the audience for direct mail? It's important to start with the audience because the messaging is going to adjust accordingly. It's helpful to break up your donors into different segments based on their relationship with your organization. So a prospective donor, this is someone who has never given before. Often there's not a strong relationship in place. These people are looking for you to answer, why should I trust you? Why should I trust this organization with my money? In instances like this, you want to explain who you are, your mission, your goals, and your vision for the future. A consistent donor would be someone who is given year after year or most years. You have an established relationship with this person, and they expect to be asked for a renewal of their support. It's been a year since I gave to X organization. I'm expecting a letter to come in. This is where the risk of stagnant messaging becomes most common. So these donors want to know, what did you do with my prior gifts? These donors will be asking, how did you use my money wisely? And what are you going to do with my money now? So your solicitations can address this by talking about what's been accomplished since their last gift, thanks in part to their donation, and your vision for the future. So you see that the messaging is connected with the prospective and the consistent donors. You are sharing your vision. And let's take this a little further. Let's advance the solicitation a little bit with a donor who might have, you feel they might have greater capacity. You believe it's time for them to take a step up. Consistent donors are often targeted for this. Donors who have started attending more of your programming might fall in this category. While they have similar needs to the renewing donors, the consistent donors, on top of that, they'll be asking the same questions, but they'll also be asking, what are you doing now that requires greater commitment by me? In this instance, you'll want to make the case that you have done great work already, you have a strong vision for the future, and with an increase of their donation, that vision is going to become a reality. So what is making that case? Making your case is at the very core of all fundraising. When you make your case, you're telling a story where the donor is the hero. This story should create an emotional response using personal testimony. I would like to state emotional responses are not just happy or sad. They can be excited, they can be hopeful, they can be nostalgic. So in the case of a county historical society, they might tell stories of some of the lost businesses or some of the great old sites that were available in this town that are no longer there. That creates a sense of nostalgia. But by digitizing these records, by putting these pictures online, it creates that sense of hope that you can relive some of those memories that are cherished. So you notice there's a lot of emotion attached to that. When making your case, you want it to define a need and offer a solution that's reasonable and makes sense. Donors like to see achievable goals and tangible results. After identifying both the need and the solution, you need to go a little further. You need to show how this solution is going to fit into the big picture. How does this advance your organization moving forward? How does this impact your ability to achieve your mission moving forward? Ultimately, how does achieving this goal affect the community? So put it all under this big picture. So let's try an example. Um, here's a very quick example of making a case that I wrote up. Um, Thanks to the patronage of generous donors like you, Baldwin County Historical Society has made excellent progress this year. We hired our first part-time curator, Jim Smith, to preserve our collections. Volunteers began the process of digitizing county marriage records. We hosted the 6th annual Women of Baldwin lecture series featuring Emily Doe, who discussed county education initiatives. So with that, I've set this idea of creating emotional responses, that here's what's happened, here's all the work that has been done. We will continue this work into the new year with the inauguration of the Baldwin Initiative. Through partnerships with a local college, the BCHS will collect, transcribe, and digitize oral histories from across the county to preserve our collective heritage. Your ongoing support is critical to continuing the BCHS mission. Last year, you graciously donated $50. Can you demonstrate your own dedication to the Baldwin Initiative by doubling your donation with a gift of $100? So I've set a case that we've done some great work in the past. I've made the case of what's going to happen in the future. And then I've made the solicitation that asks, will they support us with their own dedication? So I'm using a lot of strong words here. The goal in sending a letter is that the prospective donor reads it and sends in a gift. For this reason, letters should be concise. This is not a newsletter. It is best to stay with one page, 12 to 14 point simple fonts. You want to tell your reader that you are writing to ask for their support of your organization. You need to be to the point. It's important to ask for a specific amount. Asking for a renewal of a prior donation would be something in the vein of, I would like to ask you to support the County Historical Society with a renewal of your $50 donation. Soliciting a new or prospective donor might seem tricky since you don't have a previous donation to start from. So in cases like that, the organization might end up asking for an amount that would be, say, the average gift. But that amount will depend on your organization. So be sure to ask for a specific amount. Most readers will skim letters to get to the point. So it's a good practice to highlight the most important point. And I've done so here with the underlining in bold. If that important point is, will you support the County Historical Society with a gift of $100 by December 31st? Bold it, italicize it, underline it, whatever you need to do to make sure that your donor sees it. Solicitation letters should be as personal as possible. That can be difficult when you're sending out a couple hundred letters, but there are some ways to personalize letters that are fairly simple. Use an informal greeting when it fits. So, dear Jim, dear Margaret, rather than say, dear sir and madam. Letters should be hand-signed when possible. People like to see hand-signed letters. They like to see handwritten envelopes. It looks much more personal than a printed envelope, and you'll see a lot more people open those envelopes up. So if you have a lot of volunteers who have the time to hand address envelopes, even if it's the top 10%, 20% of your donors, whichever, I would advocate doing as many personal touches as possible. You do want to include your contact information on the letter. This way, donors know that there's a real person behind the letter that they can get in touch with. Your letter also needs a way for the donor to respond that's convenient. Often, this is a reply card and a return envelope, but you can also include a link to your giving page. Your letter should always have some form of follow-up. It's a good practice to have a multifaceted approach. So this might be a letter in conjunction with a phone call or an email message. The follow-up helps us mitigate issues where a donor might say, forget a letter, or they haven't made up their mind. And it's a good idea to prioritize the most personal follow-up with your largest donors. Consistent donors are often happy to receive an email message that acts kind of as a gentle nudge to click on a link to your giving page or renew their gift. So whatever follow-up you have planned, Be aware of donor expectations. If your solicitation letter states that you will call them in a week, then you are obligated to call them and not email them. Your largest donors will expect more personal connection. On the other side, a donor who's only given online before might not be comfortable with a phone call and may be much more comfortable getting an email from you. So just be aware of their what would be most comfortable for them. When should you send your letter? Well, it's common for organizations to send a letter at the end of the year. You can see most giving happens in the month of December, especially the last few days of the year. You can see it's 17%. I encourage all organizations to send out year-end letters, but it's important to remember that this is the point where you're competing with virtually every other organization in your community, along with some of the national nonprofits. So your letter will be reaching donors at a time when they're considering philanthropy, yes, but also spending a lot of money on other holiday-related things. So for this reason, it's helpful to plan appeals for the entire year. This could be a spring appeal, summer, fall, all three, maybe just a June and December appeal. It's entirely up to you. Some things to consider would be events or holidays that create a natural period where donors will take an interest in your organization. So if your nonprofit takes a big part in a local festival or an event, sending out an appeal around the time of the event can build on, it can really stress the impact you have on your community. Founding dates for either your organization, your town, your county, those can act as a natural giving date as well. So a more personal one would be the anniversary of a donor's last gift. You have to be on top of their giving schedule, but it can serve the same purpose, but it also reinforces you pay attention to the donor. So no matter how many appeals you plan, give yourself time to prepare. This is not something you want to rush. Have volunteers, have a spouse, have a friend look over the letter so that a fresh set of eyes can make sure it looks good. Give yourself time to edit the letter, but set a firm drop date on your calendar so you have a timeline and you don't just keep pushing it back and back and back. So with all of your direct mail, be aware of your audience, be aware of what they need to hear, make a case that has a defined need and compelling solutions. Every letter that you send should be as personable as possible, but it should be concise. Have a follow-up plan, stick to it, and be aware of the timing. You want this letter to be as impactful as possible for your organization. This is my contact information. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you have any other questions about the presentation or if you'd like to talk through any other fundraising a little more. Thank you so much for joining me in the direct mail webinar and taking time to learn more about fundraising.